Hi, welcome to the Accountant Guy. Today we are going to create a Notion debt tracker which can help track our debt payments on time and help us get debt-free. In this tracker, we will find a summary section that shows the total loan amount, total amount repaid, total interest repaid, and the repayment in percentage. Under Debt Overview, we have student loan, credit card, car loan, personal loan, home loan, and other loan. Under each head, we have the total loan amount, total amount repaid, total interest repaid, repayment in percentage, and the date by which you be free of the debt. Then we have debt progressive payments, which show the progressive due payments outlined for the time ahead. This shows the month of payment, the amount of repayment, and the status of payment as paid or not paid. Once an amount is repaid, clicking on the checkbox updates the status as paid and vice versa. Simply click and enter the payment amount and update the payment status to update your progress. When an amount is paid, it reflects the same in the Debt Overview section under the respective debt for amount repaid, interest repaid, and repayment in percentage. Now let's start building this Notion debt tracker. In order to build this minimalistic Notion debt tracker, we will require 5 databases. First, we have the loan details. Here we will provide the details related to a loan as to the repayment, giving us the outstanding balance in the end. Then we have the debt database, which holds the entire database of all the debts. This includes the loan amount, interest rate, minimum payment, additional repayment, initial repayment date, and the date when we will be free of the debt. Then we have the Debt Overview database, which gives an overview of each of the debts in one glance. We have the loan amount, total amount repaid, principal repaid, interest repaid, outstanding amount, repayment in percentage, and the debt-free date. After this, we have the Summary of Debt database, which shows the loan amount, the amount repaid, the interest repaid, the repayment percentage, and the debt-free date of each type of debt discussed earlier. Finally, we have the Total Debt section, which shows us the total debt value of all debts combined in this database. So let's start building each of the databases one by one. We will start off this Notion debt tracker by building the debt database. In this database, we will list all the different types of debt we have. For each debt, we will have a loan amount, which says the total amount of the loan against the debt. Then we have the interest rate per annum for each debt. Then we have a minimum payment, which is the minimum monthly payment to be repaid each month. Then we have an additional repayment amount that is done during the first installment, such as down payment. Then we have the initial repayment date, which is the first installment date when the debt is repaid. Then we have the debt-free period, which calculates how many months will it take to be debt-free since the initial repayment date. Then we have expected debt-free, by which calculates an estimated debt-free date since the repayment of the first installment date, adding the debt-free period to the initial installment date. Finally, we have net loan outstanding amount, which calculates the net debt payable before the first installment date. This will be the opening balance of the debt to be entered in the loan details database. Let's understand these properties one by one. In this database, we have 6 types of debts specified over here. We have student loan, credit card, car loan, personal loan, home loan, and other loan. This is specified in the name property, which is the default property created while creating a database. Then we have loan amount, interest rate, minimum payment, and additional repayment, which all have a number property associated with them, and it's specified in US dollars. Interest rate is calculated per annum, specified in US dollars, and put in percent format. After this, we have an initial repayment date, which is the date when a loan is repaid for the first time. Then we have a calculation of the interest rate per month, calculated by dividing the interest rate by 12. This gives us the I value. Then we have a debt-free period, which is essentially a formula that calculates the debt-free period in months. Next, we are adding the debt-free period to the initial repayment date to calculate the expected date by when we will be free of debt. Thus, it's derived using a formula of adding the debt-free period to the initial repayment date. Finally, we have the net loan outstanding, which is the amount of loan outstanding before the initial repayment ever done. This is derived from a formula deducting the additional payment from the loan amount. Here we have completed the debt database. Let's move on to the next part. Now it's time to fill in the loan details in respect to each of the debt that we covered up earlier. In this database, first up we have the installment number, which specifies the number of installments paid against the debt. Then we fill the details of repayment of debt as required. Then we have the date of payment of installment, which specifies the date of repayment of debt as per installment. This has a date property associated to it. Then we have category of loan being repaid related to the debt overview database, which will be discussed soon. Here we specify one of 6 categories of debt being repaid. Then we have the opening balance of debt being repaid prior to the repayment. The first month's payment amount is the net loan outstanding as per the debt database, and for each subsequent month's payment we need to copy and paste the closing balance of previous month's closing balance to current month's opening balance. So we can see that the closing balance of each previous month are being copied and pasted to opening balance of subsequent month. Then we have the payment amount, which is the minimum amount paid each month. For the first installment, it represents the minimum amount and additional payment, if any. For each subsequent months, it is equal to the minimum amount as discussed earlier. Then we have an interest calculation, which is a formula specifying the interest amount paid each installment. This is opening balance multiplied with the interest rate divided by 12 that gives the interest value. The principal value is nothing but payment amount less interest amount that is being paid. These are calculated as per formulas. Then we get closing balance, that is equal to opening balance less the principal amount for each month. Next up we have a checkbox that reflects the payment status as paid or not paid. Clicking on the checkbox helps to update the status of the payment. Finally, we have the amount that has been paid against the total amount, interest, and the principal amount against each debt. The total repayment is calculated as a formula that is considered when an amount is paid and the checkbox is ticked against it. This logic is repeated for interest and the principal value as well. Along with this, the amount repaid against the total amount, interest amount, and principal is summed up at the bottom as well. Let's move to the next database. Next up, we have Debt Overview Database. This shows an overview of all types of debts discussed so far. First up, we have the loan amount, which is rolled up from the loan details database, and we have used a formula to derive the same value from the rolled up amounts. Then we have the total amount repaid, total principal repaid, and total interest repaid, which are derived as roll-up values from the respective loan details database we discussed earlier. So these are calculated for each debt and populated as such. Then we have an outstanding amount of loan calculated by loan amount deducted with the principal repaid. So the formula calculates the same as well. Then we have repayment in percentage, which is the principal repaid to the total loan amount calculated in percentage. Now, let's move to the next database. Next up, we have the summary of debt database, which calculates the total loan amount, total amount repaid, total interest repaid, repayment in percentage, and the date by which we will be free of the debt for each of the debts discussed earlier. We have pulled in the figures for each of the properties as a roll-up from the Debt Overview database. Similarly, we have pulled in the figures for total amount repaid, total interest repaid, repayment in percentage, and the debt-free date as well from the Debt Overview database. These are the necessary properties from which we have rolled up the values. We need to repeat the same process for all types of debts to complete the database. Let's proceed to the next one. Finally, we are on to the total debt database, which reflects the total loan amount, the total amount repaid, the total interest repaid, and the repayment in percentage for all the debts combined. Just like the summary of debt database, here we have rolled up the values from the debt overview database, calculating the respective values for our purpose. We have populated the same using formula to pull in the desired values. This completes the building up of all the databases for this minimalistic Notion debt tracker. Now, let's look at the primary dashboard. This is a summary section that shows the total loan amount, the total amount repaid, the interest repaid, and the repayment in percentage for all the debts combined. This is linked to the total debt database we built earlier. In the debt overview section, we have each of the debts comprising the total loan amount, the total amount repaid, interest repaid, repayment in percentage, and the debt-free date. This is linked to the summary of the debt database we discussed earlier. Finally, we have the debt progress section showing the progressive repayments of debts with corresponding dates and amounts. This is linked to the individual loans from the loans details database we discussed earlier. Here we complete the Notion debt tracker. I hope we learned something new today. You can download this template from the link in the description.